In 1954, the Supreme Court handed down one of the most celebrated rulings in American history, Brown versus Board of Education. We're taught that it ended segregation in schools, that from that moment on, equality walked through the classroom doors. But history isn't that simple, and neither is this story. The truth is, Brown versus Board didn't instantly desegregate anything. The court declared that separate but equal had no place in education, but it never gave a clear timeline for what came next. A year later, another decision said schools should integrate with all deliberate speed, and that phrase became the perfect excuse for delay. In some towns, it meant years, even decades, before a single black student walked into a white school. In others, schools shut down entirely rather than integrate. And while we often picture this story taking place in the Deep South, segregation wasn't confined there. In the North, segregation lived quietly, not through laws, but through neighborhoods, zoning, and invisible lines drawn by housing policies. White flight, redlining, and school district boundaries made sure that even without signs over the doors, separation stayed alive. The Brown decision is often remembered as a moral triumph, and it was. But the court's reasoning leaned heavily on social science. Studies like the famous doll test, where black children often chose white dolls as prettier or smarter, revealing how deep racism had wounded their sense of self. That evidence helped convince the justices, but critics later said it shouldn't take broken hearts to prove broken laws. Still, despite resistance, despite loopholes, Brown versus Board changed the national conscience. It became the spark for the civil rights movement, proof that the law could be bent toward justice, even if people weren't ready to follow it. But here's the part that's often left out. 70 years later, America's schools remain deeply divided, not by law, but by wealth, by zip code, by race. The names and faces have changed, but the pattern hasn't. So maybe Brown versus Board wasn't the end of segregation. Maybe it was the beginning of a promise, one we're still trying to keep. If you learned something new, share this video, because myths only fade when truth gets louder.